So let me explain this verse. Back in the old days, the context is verse. Back in the old days, the Jewish people were a taken over nation. All right, they were a taken over nation for at least 300 years. So that's older than the United States. It's like the Native Americans in some ways. Basically, the Jewish people could not have their own king, but they're still under the emperor of Rome. A centurion would be considered, what, a soldier, right? A soldier of the Roman Empire, which means that he would be considered an enemy of the Jewish people. All right? It would be something like the Palestinians and Jews, or maybe the Jews and the Holocaust and the Germans. So you can see that animosity. But yet this centurion, in a lot of ways, was different because he loved the Jews. He helped build the synagogue. He was one of those people that if he could become a Jewish person, he would become, but since he was Roman, he could not, both ways. But yet, he came to Jesus. He sent the 장로님s, the Jewish elders, the 장로님, the same thing, to go and ask Jesus to heal his slave. All right? A slave owner doesn't have to get a slave healed. He can just buy another one. The centurions were really wealthy. But he loved his slave. All right? Think about that, too. And so he sent the Jewish 장로님s, the Korean 장로님s, I don't care, to them, to Jesus, to ask what? For him to heal his servant. So Jesus got up and went toward the centurion house. But the centurion, instead of accepting Jesus into his home, he ran outside and said to what? Jesus, you are, he called him Lord. This is interesting. A Roman who was an enemy of the Jewish people called Jesus Lord. And he asked him to heal his servant because he felt that Jesus was not worthy to enter his house. That's how much honor he had. That's how much faith he had. And then, because of that faith, he proved to Jesus, Jesus said, you know, you have more faith than everyone gives you. And then the servant was healed. Let me ask you this. Do you think God works alone in this world? No, God does not work alone. God needs you. God needs you. Every one of you. But do you think God needs perfect people to do ministry in this world? Or is there such a thing as perfect people? Probably not. The reality is that God needs you to do ministry for God in this world. God needs you. It's not some 장로님, or not some 목사님, or some religious figure. God needs every one of God's children. But yet, how does that work? We have relationships with each other, but yet, name some relationships we have.
Girlfriend.
We have one boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe, or we have family structures like a mother, typical mother and father, and their kids and stuff like that. We have relationships, all right? We have a relationship with God, God and us, hopefully, all right? All right, hopefully. We all have these relationships toward one another. But yet, the reality is that God cannot do ministry with the world without Jesus, of course, but yet needs us. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Before Jesus came, all right, God and us were disconnected. With Jesus, we have connection. Make sense? Makes sense, right? But the reality is that even before this, others, right? We could have a relationship with others, supposedly, but we could not have a relationship with God. But yet, with Jesus Christ, we have a full relationship with God because Jesus died on the cross. Make sense? That's basic, right? Basic 101 Christianity, right? But let me push it a little farther. The relationships that we have with each other, are they perfect? Usually, friendships come and go, right? Yeah. But yet, if we have a true friendship, we would have God in it. Right? That makes sense? But even the thing is about why Christians can supposedly, in perfection, have that kind of relationship is of Christ. But even these things break, right? Even these friendships break. And not be friends anymore, because we hurt each other. But the reality is, if you take one step further, we look at us. Right? What's inside of us? Because the reality is God cannot use imperfect people. God can only use imperfect people. And some of the greatest theologians always said that. Only God can use, what does this word mean?
Wow.
Because if you're not, you don't need God. When is it that when we reach out to God? When we're hurting. Why do you think suicide is such a big killer of teenagers? Sad. And they can't fill those gaps. If that gap is there, what are you going to fill it with? I hope so. But if you don't know God, what are you going to fill it with? You're going to fill it with anything and everything that can make you forget. Drugs, lovers, friends, porn, retail therapy, you name it. What is it that you're going to fill it with? What is this area that you're going to fill it with? Sports. You name it. Buying things, buying new gadgets, driving new cars, whatever. You're going to fill it with everything that is what? Material. But is that enough? Even the richest people commit suicide. Even the people that have everything commit suicide. Until you understand that God can only use wounded people, only then maybe you can start being what? A blessing to others. If you look at the centurion, he didn't have to go to Jesus. He was a powerful man. But he understood that he was a source of blessing. Maybe. Because he reached out to Jesus. You yourselves have to fill this somehow. You can fill it with something imperfect, something that'll last a short time, but it's not going to be anything that's filling for you. It's like a donut. You eat it, it feels good, but it's gone. Then what? You're going to eat another donut? Or you're going to eat another donut? Until you eat so much, you start puking. That's the same with drugs.
Whoa. What the?
Same thing. What are you going to fill this area with? Only if, until this area is filled with God and the love of God, does this become whole again. Does that make sense? That all the pain, all the sorrow that you're going through, all the misunderstandings you're going through, is actually maybe a way for you to understand what God's all about. Because only then, when you are wounded and you seek God and God becomes real to you, then what? You can start doing ministry. Because you are all ministers here, no matter what age you are. Let me repeat myself. You are all ministers here. Does that make sense? I'm not saying you're a 목사님 or a 전도사님, but you are ministers that ministers toward each other and this world. You, I don't care if you're 5 years old, 20 years old, 40 years old, 50, 60, every one of you is a minister here. But only until you understand that we are wounded people can you start really understanding and accepting God and doing ministry. Sources of blessing. You yourselves, when you do ministry, are sources of blessing for God. We read in Corinthians that you are the temple. God dwells in you. God dwells in that woundedness. And then what? You then can be able to minister toward each other. But first, you must reconcile yourself with God in that woundedness. Being second generation, 1.5 generation, it's hard. Because one, you're not living in Korea. You're living in the United States. Things are different. Some people are minorities at your school. Some people are not. Some people have Korean friends at school. Some people don't. Some people have Latino friends, black friends, whatever. Your parents don't understand you, supposedly. You don't understand your parents, definitely.